and my guests are seated. So let me introduce them to you, and then we get ready to do our discussion. My guest this morning is senior lecturer at GIMPA. He teaches the law and is managing partner, Axis Legal, Akufo-Addo. He's also an author of legal texts. Good morning and welcome to Newsfile.
Thank you, Samson.
Great. Now, Professor Justice Bowley is Professor of Public Administration at the University of Ghana Business School. Good morning and welcome. Always good to welcome you. Also here in the studio is Dr. Eric Odro-Osai. He's a lawyer and governance expert. Also just finished something in the works and he's going to launch it sometime. Is it this week or when? He's got a book. Is it this week?
Yes, this week.
When is it?
Wednesday.
Wednesday. Okay, so this is your book. Fiscal Decentralization and Financial Management Practices of Subnational Governments. Evidence from Ghana. What's it about?
Well, it's about looking at the financial management practices of local government. A lot of funds goes there, and nobody seems to care what are the financial management practices there. So I wanted to look at the situation on the ground to inform policy.
Okay. Is everybody invited to this launch?
Everybody is invited.
Where is it happening?
British Council Auditorium.
British Council Auditorium. What time?
5 p.m.
5 p.m. You see the day again is?
5th September,
5th
Wednesday.
September, that's Wednesday.
That's right.
British Council. Thank you very much. Also here in the studio is Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante. He is Director of Advocacy and Policy Engagement, Ghana Center for Democratic Development, CDD. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, sir.
Right, so CDD too has had a big, national event this week, the Kronti Ne Akwamu. And what a lecture by Dr. Jima Bwedi, Professor Jima Bwedi. Okay, so the instruction from my production is that we deal with Cathedral first, but I thought Cathedral was a minor matter, but I have no option, so let's deal with that first. Let's take a listen and watch some of these clips, and then we'll come back to deal with the issues.
It does not appear to me that this adventure that the state wishes to embark upon in collaboration with church is actually a necessary one. I think this raises questions, worrying questions for me about how power is actually allocated and distributed and used in this country, that one person can decide that land that is in the public trust can be donated, no matter the value of the land. And this is potentially worth millions of dollars. And then that's it. No legislation about it, no debate. I think that it speaks to just the absence of limits, the absence of real limitations on presidential power, right? So what if the next president comes and wants to do another land for something else? And this is land that is being donated, essentially, not even being sold. So it appears that the president is the allocator of land, the donor of land, can do anything. And this is not any one president. This is just the nature of our presidency. It's just we need to decongest the power that the president has.
In this case is that because of those existing bungalows, there will be a need for demolition. And so what we did, therefore, was to identify, well-built residential facilities of topmost quality. We've invited the judges, together with people from lands and natural resources, and each and every building that was made available for them to satisfy. In fact, in one of the visits, of course, which I was there myself, one of the family was said, Daddy, this is very beautiful. Why are we still wasting time? We need to move in quickly. So the selection of the new residential buildings, there were even more placed in the better places in terms of construction than where some of those never had a complaint from any of those judges that were going to be relocated.
As to the payment,
That aspect too, I need some further clearance from my predecessor. Right. But I believe that it's a national asset, and where the funding is coming from, I know of individuals who have made pledges to support it. The funding or who is to support it is what should come out clearly to Ghanaians, so that we get to know that this is where the money is coming from, this is how it's going to be used, and this is how, so that it's made very transparent.
I think that some of those who have made responses, have made remarks, have not been able to state the context that will make people understand. And so certain comparisons have been made which, in my view, are misplaced, unwarranted. For example, what is the context of the National Cathedral? The context is that it is a heritage project in connection with the 60th anniversary of our independence. That is where the concern is. If it's in respect of our 60th anniversary, the independence, is it for one section of the country? Is it for the whole of the country, our independence? Yeah. So if I have been requested to propose, I would have proposed, can we have a national edifice in the form of a national dialogue or interfaith dialogue center, in which you can have a church, you can have a mosque, and you have an auditorium, so that, because Ghana has become a model of interfaith harmony and peace, you see it. So still people are coming here to learn from us, and we want to deepen that. And I think that an edifice like this, a project like this, would have given shape to it, to make it even a more permanent something. I would have loved it that way.
We're grateful to the Almighty that exactly a year on, and once again on my way to the Independence Square celebrations, we're gathered here to unveil the design. I'm deeply grateful to the distinguished Board of Trustees, and the eminent clergy, and the Secretariat of the Cathedral Project for working around the clock to make this possible. Throughout history, what has distinguished the great cathedrals and those with a national character is the broad mobilization of the entire community in support of the building and maintenance of the cathedrals. Before the cathedrals, this was true of the temples and the tabernacle. On Sunday, the 25th of February this year, I visited the Washington National Cathedral to go and worship, and was reminded once again of this truth. The challenge of building Ghana's national cathedral, therefore, relates to the mobilization of our people in support of the project. The broad representation of the Ghanaian Christian community at this event shows the emergence of a national coalition that will arise and build the cathedral to the glory of God.
Right. So you had, among others, the architect explaining matters. You had the president also. You had John Peter Amawu speaking about the relocation, and H. Kwesi Prempeh, professor, the executive director of the CDD, speaking about it. And also, okay, you had Reverend Frimpong, who also spoke about it, as well as Reverend Dr. Boafo, the Methodist bishop, the one who is taking over from Reverend Frimpong, on the funding and the need for transparency in the matters. Of course, you also had Sheikh Aramiao from the Office of the National Chief Imam on the matter. Right. So maybe I should start with Dr. Asante, because we have heard CDD, as in H. Kwesi Prempeh, and also in Professor Jimabwedi, speak about it. What exactly is their point, or if CDD has a position, what exactly is it about the projects?
Thank you very much. I would say CDD doesn't have a position.
Okay.
As a collective position. Professor Prempe has spoken about it. Professor Jima Boydi has spoken about it in different ways. And I think it's interesting in your take that you mentioned the fact that you set out to talk about the location of the project. But it builds into questions that are being asked right at the beginning in 2017 when the president actually cut the sword or told us that there was going to be a national cathedral. Remember, this was not an MPP government, it wasn't the MPP government manifesto. We only heard about it sometime in March or February when the president talked about it. As
part of the independence anniversary celebration, 60th.
Exactly. So, I mean, there are two main questions. One is to do what's the legitimate role that the state should have in building a cathedral, you know, but there's the other question about whether this is a priority at this time of the nation's life. But that also builds into a broader question about state religion, you know, what should be the relationship between the state. And that's why you can see that the discourse is so varied. Some people are talking about location, some people are talking about, you know, what was the business of the state in this, right? But I think for me, two things must happen if we have to move forward. Setting the location is an easier matter that can be resolved. I think if you take the chronology of what has happened from 2007 March, there were concerns and discussions, but the intensity actually came up when you did your take last week. And why was it? Because the state was now in the process of dissipating more resources in order to put up a national cathedral. People thought. So even those people who were in the middle, like, okay, if the Christian community wants to build a national cathedral, the president wants to facilitate that process, that's not a big deal. But now you're saying that you are going to break buildings, even new buildings that have been built like 5 years ago. In order to achieve that, then you cross the line. And I think that created all the intensity we have seen in the last week. So the location issue actually might meet some people halfway. And I have to say this, for me, from a public interest point of view, the state can proceed from the basis that the Christian community, the churches and so on, have made a significant contribution to our national life in terms of education, health, social protection, social cohesion, peace, stability. And therefore, if there's a desire for a national place of worship, the state's contribution is this. So on that premise, we do that. We can do that and say, okay, women in Ghana are interested in putting a place for a center for women. The state has an interest, a public interest, responding to a large majority of the secular society, and would make this contribution. But if the state is going to do that, it has to be transparent, because it is about precedent setting, so that it doesn't become, whilst you're trying to promote one public interest, you don't injure or detract or undercut another. So it's important that you set the ground rules and say, okay, our contribution is land, but it's land that is not overly, you know, it's not going to cost us so heavily that it doesn't make any sense for us to push this agenda. So that transparency is important, and that transparency cannot be by press conference. It cannot be the minister coming to sit and say that, yes, this is the legal arrangement. No. Where is the MOU? You know, what kind of arrangement have we, how much money are we going to spend? What kind of land? So that we know what it is, you know, what the commitments are. And that it doesn't escalate. So it's okay, we are not making any contribution. Then later you hear, oh no, now the state is putting this amount of money. Oh, now we are doing this. I think clarity is important, because when we go past this chapter and something else comes up, then we have clear precedent about how that should happen. And I think, for me, the next thing that basically should happen is that the location issue, then, for me, I would prefer that it was another location. I've heard some brilliant ideas around the new military cemetery and so on. I think any place where you don't need to commit more funds to create a space for the National Cathedral would ease people's concerns about the construction of the National Cathedral.
So what exactly do we seek? And you would have heard the argument that nations that have developed have to make demolitions and do re-engineer, their cities or cities. Initially, it was that government was not involved. We have come to know that that's not exactly true, because government is doing the relocation temporary of the judges to the new buildings that have been gotten for them. We're told that Mr. Mewu was saying it's about $250, $300, is it $2,005 or $3,000 per month for a rent for each of the judges that have been moved there. And we understand about, is it 10 or 11 judges that have been moved there. So we know that is cost to government. Then again, they have committed to build a new place, to build 21 bungalows, so that by the time the project is over, they will move away from the temporary place and go to the permanent place. We know again that government, and not the trustees or the board of governors that have committed to this, again has committed to relocate the Judicial Training Institute. We understand that the Scholarship Secretariat is affected, the Passport Office is affected, there are a few other offices that are affected. Government indicates that it is willing to do these things. What is the problem? We want government to declare upfront what is involved or what. If government came later after the whole thing was over and told us how much has been expended, what would have been wrong about that?
Well, there are two things. First of all, I think it's very clear that this is a state project. And for me, it's clear.
You can't say that.
Well, let me explain. This is the president that came to tell us that we're going to build a national cathedral. It's possible that in 2016 consultations have been had, because that came in March of 2017. That was even when the president has not even appointed ministers and so on. So this is something that obvious, but it's the president that came. The president that cut the sword, set up a board of trustees. So this was a state-led project, right? Now, we were told that the funding from the state, that, but the funding is going to come from the Christian community and the churches.
And they've actually started donating.
So that is the financial arrangement. But the president made that this is dear to his heart. So again, we don't even know whether it's the president or government or the state. Whether it's the MPP government that wants this, or the president that wants it, or this is something, a collective beyond just the government. So, but what we have, if you see the chronology, it came from the state. So I don't think there's any doubt, but as I'm saying, that is legitimate. There is a public interest imperative that you can make in respect of the Christian community and say, this is what they have contributed. So if there's a desire for this, and the president feels that this is something that you can make a contribution. Now, how do you do that? For me, it's a problem. And it has to be done upfront. And every time you are thinking of that, you have to think about the public interest matters, which is that, are you going to impose, a disproportionate sort of amount of resources, considering that we have a banking crisis, you have all of these other needs. Somebody will raise the point that, no, yes, you should promote this public interest, but don't undercut that by injuring other public interests, which is that we need to count every penny.
Okay.
So I think that is where transparency about how much resources the state is prepared to spend has to be discussed so that we can say, oh no, we agree, make this commitment and this is enough. And I think that's where people have a problem, that you have to demolish all of this. If there's an alternative, then, you know, why not consider that and make it less costly?
All right. So, Dr. Addo, let's hear your view on this. What's our problem?
I think basically from the discussions, I see three things happening. I've not heard anyone saying that it's not a good venture.
Some have said so.
That is not a good venture.
Yes, some have said so.
It's misplaced priority.
Yes.
At this
Well,
time.
you see, in my view, I do not think it's a misplaced priority. What I think, because it's happening all over. You go to France, it's there. I visited the Cathedral before. You go to Morocco, they have a national worship center. I visited there before in Rabat. I think what is missing from here, from this one, is the fact that we did not define it as Sheikh Arimiyahu said, an interfaith center. I was thinking that we should have a national worship center, a national prayer center that would accommodate all the various faiths in this country. And if it is a state-led, everybody would understand.
Is that practical?
It is practical. We can do that. The fact that it has not happened before does not imply that we cannot do it. We believe in religious pluralism in this country. So I was thinking that we'll proceed along those lines. That notwithstanding, if the initiative came from the Christian community, that can also be understandable because of the dominance, because of their contribution to society and all of that. And the fact that the government also has a role to play. When you look at the Constitution, they have a role to play by supporting and promoting the growth and development of such religions. But the question I'm asking is, how much are we prepared to invest in this? And that is where the transparency issue comes in.
How much is too much?
Well, how much is too much will depend on how much you tell us, depending on our priorities and what we have. So from day one, I was thinking that the whole roadmap will be rolled out. People will know how much it will cost. People will know the state's involvement. People will know what is expected of government and all of that. And then it will help us to appreciate the issues better. I want to agree with Kojo that, you know, the mystery surrounding this particular cathedral, the non-transparency nature, is what has given reason to why all this and why we are here today. I think that we should open it up. If it is a state-led project, we should say, this is a state-led project, this will be the extent of state involvement, this is how much we are going to spend, these are the implications. Let us have a national conversation on the matter so that we can move the process
What
forward.
else do you seek? You've been told that this is not the state that is going to fund it. What else do you want to know by if it's a state-led project? You've been told that all the state is doing is providing land, even though I have supplied information, and from the correspondence that, you know, made it into the news, the letter for relocation of the judges, copied to 9 judges, you will see clearly that the state's commitment was beyond providing land, because in this letter, the state committed to. It says, let me read just a portion of it. It says, on the 5th of April, let me see if I can read a good portion of it. I write to apologize, and this is the acting Chief Justice, the Justice Julius Ansah, and this is written on the 10th of August, 2018. It's titled, Relocation of Judges. I write to apologize to all judges affected by the relocation of Bangalore's exercise for the administration's inability to provide you with timely written notification to relocate from your present accommodation. Just a little background. The little background I need to add is that, a footnote, is that this letter was written after some of the judges had complained because they had been giving oral notices to move, and some of the oral notices required them to move within 24 hours, and they were very angry about that. So when they complained, then this letter was written. Now it says, on the 5th of April, 2018, a delegation from the Office of the President informed me of the government's intention to utilize the entire area of land between the State House and Ridge Runabout for the construction of the proposed National Cathedral project. The delegation, which was led by the Reverend Dr. Asante Entwi, chairman, included Most Reverend Bishop Justice Ofei Akrofi, the former Anglican Archbishop, of Accra, the Honorable Peter Amewu, the Minister of Lands and Natural Resources, and Dr. Paul Opoku-Mensah. As proposed, the National Cathedral project will result in the demolition of all buildings within the project catchment area, from the Ridge Circle to the Scholarship Secretariat, including bungalows occupied by our judges and the Judicial Training Institute at East Ridge. In lieu of this, the government has committed, and it is instructive, the government has committed to construct 21 new bungalows on the Second Circular Road cantonments to replace the ones affected by the project construction, affected by the project construction of the new bungalows. Okay, so I think I got that wrong. It says, in lieu of this, the government has committed to construct 21 new bungalows on the Second Circular Road cantonments to replace the ones affected by the project. Construction of the new bungalows is expected to be completed and handed over to the service by January 2020. Meanwhile, government has provided temporary residential buildings. Once again, government has provided temporary residential buildings for all judges affected for the period the new bungalows would be under construction. These bungalows have been allocated to enable all judges affected to temporarily relocate from their present accommodation. The Honorable Minister of Lands and Natural Resources, by a letter dated the 24th of July 2018, formally confirmed the verbal representations made at the 5th April 2018 meeting, i.e., the relocation of the judges affected by the National Cathedral project and the construction of the 21 new bungalows, as well as a land for the Judicial Training Institute. Last paragraph. The late formal communication from the sector minister made it difficult for us to give you early notification on the relocation from your current residential accommodation, although I admit that since the agreement in principle had been reached, it would have been proper for us to give you a hint at least. Please accept our apologies for the delay in notifying you of the relocation. And this is copied to all the 9 judges affected.
Well said. I mean, this came after they have initiated the demolition exercise. What I wanted to put out, the government to have put out was, okay, it's going to cost us so much to demolish. It's going to, the land on which the cathedral will be built is going to cost us so much. Costs of relocating them, maybe the cost of the temporary accommodation is going to cost so much. Then after that, we are going to construct 21 new accommodation for them. This is how much it's going to cost. And then the construction of a new judicial training institute for you, or if they are going to provide the land, this is how much it's going to cost. In all, for the next 3 years, the state is going to invest maybe $200 million into this particular project. And this is how it's going to be funded from our budget. That is transparency, that is openness, that is clarity.
That's all you need.
That's all I need. It's a very good project. It's something that can help us, but I would have wished that we moved it to another level. A national worship center, or a national prayer center, or a national interfaith center. And then the state will be clear that this is how much you want to push into it. Nobody should tell us that it's not a priority, because our spiritual growth is as important as our physical growth.
Okay. All right. Yes. So, Prof, let's hear you too. What's your take on this?
Unfortunately, my take may not be as powerful as Samson's take.
Your take is more powerful.
Thank you very much, and good morning to your viewers. I think that the relationship between state and religion, it's a very, very important relationship. Historically, across nations, it's been what has made or unmade nations. In Africa, it's even more complex. We have seen a lot of crises in many countries that have been as a result of the cocktail of politics and religion mixed together. And when the state takes some interest in religious matters, it has to be looked at very carefully. The good thing for Ghana is that Ghana has a very, very good environment, very, very congenial relationship, very, very excellent relationship between the various faiths in Ghana. My PhD supervisor is always amazed when I say that during festivities we exchange food. People give food when it's Christmas to Muslims and vice versa when we are celebrating Easter. And he says he's never seen this in any country except Ghana. And this is something that we have to cherish and protect. So relationship between states and religious agencies are such that in many countries, and I have advocated, and I'm happy that this has also come up, about the role of the church or religion in the state's affairs, including, for example, issues about taxation, issues about resource management and all of that. And if you went to many developed societies, churches and other religious groups actually get funding from the state because the church or the religious groups are said to perform some very important functions. And so on that basis, in fact, in many cases, it's actually not in this form that we see, but there are tax waivers for people who donate to religious groups and agencies that, or individuals who make donations to a church or religious groups get actually tax exemptions in many instances. So this is something that we need to look at carefully here. If you look at Ghana's development, it's been hugely driven, especially in the education and health sectors, hugely driven by the religious groups. So you go to many places across Ghana, but for religious groups, you will not have any form of development there. Yeah. And so the religions have played, or religious groups have played their role very, very much in Ghana's development. What has Ghana done for religious groups? Maybe a lot also, including the freedom to be able to operate and all of the things that we enjoy in Ghana. So when I heard that there was going to be a national cathedral, I thought that it was a good project that has to be done. But I agree with the Sheikh when he says, could we have had an interfaith center or something? And I like to agree with the earlier two speakers about all of the issues that have to be raised.
You believe that is practical?
The interfaith?
Yes.
If it is managed by the state, why not? It is. I have seen in many places across the world. In fact, recently I saw one where a church opens up for Muslims to come and pray when it's prayer time. If people can, and we have to be very careful when we put these issues in the political space and we mix religion with politics. It can be dangerous. Otherwise, why would my friends who are Muslims send me food during Salah, and I send them food during Christmas, that we may not be able to agree on how we define our faith and the boundaries thereof? And so I need us to be careful when we push this into the arena of politics and we begin to mix that together and we fan the flames and the passions and sentiments. I've had a lot of discussions, and many of these have been very emotional, reactive reactions to the fact that, and the Sheikh mentioned some of it, when we actually are moving to the realms of comparison. The state has done this for these people, why can it not do this for these people? And I thought that is where I will pick up from, the fact that the state should have been very clear on what it is that we want to do. Is it too much for the state?
The other argument is that the Muslims already have something that constitutes a national, mosque at the Kalkudi area.
Yeah.
Even though their explanation is that a parcel of land that used to have a mosque was demolished and turned into a car park, Rollins Park. And so they had to be given a different place, and then they were giving that other place, and then the government of Turkey is the one paying for that mosque. Right. So it's not the same, and that government was not involved in this. Couldn't it be the same way that the Christian church will also want to do something which is for them and not want to have it be an interfaith issue? Why?
Yes, so that's possible. So and that's why I completely abhor the discussions of comparisons, because it doesn't really make sense to compare. And so this is a national cathedral for Christians. I think we should leave it as that and discuss that as it is. But what I'm saying is that, just like he said, if he was asked to give a proposal, that's a proposal he would have given, and I would have given a similar proposal. But be it as it may,
Muslims already have a place that they recognize. Can we have a place for Christians to recognize? And I don't think there's anything wrong if a president initiates the discussion around it and pushes the agenda. I agree that the cost to the state has to be defined. I agree that the cost to the state has to be looked at and managed. I don't support the idea that we are demolishing to build. Could we have had other places where the land would not be as prime as this, but still useful? Can we minimize the dislocations and the cost to the state? Is it possible to do that?
The minister says they have counted the cost.
Yeah.
And the demolitions and relocations and reconstructions, this is a prudent decision they have made.
To be honest with you, as I was going to, and I will go to the business of cathedrals, right? The business of cathedrals. I was in Rwanda recently, and the government of Rwanda focused its strategy on international conferences of large nature. And that in the past year, they made over 400 million from visits that brought people in. As it is, Ghana is not well placed in terms of pure tourism. East Africa does better than us in all of those. As a country, there are some things that we do better at. For example, the education sector used to attract a lot of funding, foreign currency, from our Nigerian brothers because they send a lot of their children here. Religion is something Ghana is very good at. And if we have a national cathedral, I'm looking at the business of it, what that can do for a country. But that will still not take away the fact that we needed to have a discussion. As we say, assuming the president had invited, and I'm not sure if he didn't do that, had invited all the other religious groups and had a discussion and said, this is what I want to do, this is for Christians. Maybe at other times, there may be things that we can do for others, and all of that. That may have been something that will limit the reactive, emotional discussion that I've heard people say that we don't have food to eat, and therefore, why do you want to do this, and all of those arguments. And so it is important for the state to clearly tell us. One more thing that I thought, I have asked, I hear funds are now being raised. For such a huge project, if the state is not going to dip its hands into the state coffers and build, for such a huge project, it may take a while to raise the resources that are needed. To be honest, I thought that we should have gotten to that point where the religious groups say we now have mobilized the resources that are needed so that if the project starts, it will complete. Because the cost of starting a project and not finishing is also very, very significant.
Interesting.
But in other ways, otherwise, I think that is a good project, and I think we should support its construction.
Okay. So, Mr. Abuchi, here, we are talking cost. What's the point? And do we forget also that it is not as if it's going to be a place for us to go to church every Sunday, but we have been told that this will be the place where we'll have swearing-ins of presidents and these important occasions. There are, important VVIPs that die that we have to organize state funerals for them and all of that. What is the point if the state has to put money into such a thing? What's wrong with it?
There's a need for context, Samson, and I'm just going to say, first of all, that we need to recognize that the president is the chief spender in Ghana. So the president has the authority to spend money. Now, every expenditure, however, by the president is subject to contestation. That is where we come in, and that is where everyone else comes in. And within the context of responsive and responsible governance, the president and our government must also react. And they react either by changing or justifying. So the question of the allocation of resources and whether it is justified or not is a legitimate exercise. But it's important to recognize that the president has the authority to spend, and every expenditure may come with contests. And the contestations are what the exercise is what we're engaged in at this stage. Now to your question, what is the advantage? Let me try and play a little advocate. So I've removed the word devil. Ordinarily, you'd have said devil's advocate. But yes, so let's play a little advocacy here. So the advantage, I can recognize at least three. The first one is the fact that it provides a place for congregation for important national moments. Every country must have important moments of reflection. September 11th was a bad day for the United States, but that was an example when the country needed to have a place for reflection, where a country needed to gather itself and to reflect on things, spiritually speaking. We have an important burial, for example, that is coming up shortly. Our distinguished countryman, His Excellency Mr. Annan, is deceased. Important moments like that, a place for burial services, a place where important personalities of states and other invited guests will all gather for purposes of that funeral, for example. So burial services. But the key one, and this is the third one, the key one, which is spiritual in character, at the same time cultural, is that cathedrals, by nature, are iconic cultural symbols. And globally, they have been like that. So traditionally, cathedrals have been projects of kings in days gone by. And that's why the major cathedrals of this world had a lot of investments in the artistry and artwork because they told stories. So for example, the Duomo in Milan, in Italy, is one place where every visitor to Milan or Italy will have to go. It's an important cultural landmark, and if you go there, every single design on the wall tells a story. The Westminster Abbey, anybody who sees it, you can see the extent of investment per architecture and design that goes into those. Because those are important cultural icons of the countries that are involved. And so it is hard, and I join my colleagues in the same position, it is hard on the face of it to say cathedrals are not useful. They serve all kinds of purposes. They are important cultural symbols, they are important functional symbols and functional units that can actually help.
As we understand, the
Right.
present design is also to tell a story.
In some form, exactly. So I think, just playing this advocacy, it's important for us to understand the president has the power to spend. And I think I will just want to clarify something a little bit my good friend and colleague, Dr. Santi, was speaking about on the question of whether it's the government or the president. Per our constitution, the government and the president actually won. Article 295 defines the executive power of Ghana as the president. So
Right.
significantly, everybody else working for the president is just a worker for the president. The executive authority is the president. And so indeed, when the president speaks, we take it at face value as the government. And I'm just trying to understand and agree with your argument that at this stage, in identifying who actually is the owner of the project, once the president speaks on behalf of the executive, the president is actually speaking for the government. And so in this case, it's the government. And we can make progress in that regard. Then the question of who pays comes in. And my colleagues have all touched on that in ways that clarify a lot of the important issues at stake. Once the president is paying, or once the government of Ghana is paying, the contestations become deeper. We go back on the issue of the separation or the distinction between church and state. The Constitution is actually built around that central principle. Once the Constitution recognizes a multiplicity of faiths and separates that from the state by saying the individual has the right to manifest whatever religion he wants, the state has actually been told to back off as far as that particular area of activity is concerned. What it means, therefore, is that since every payer of a tax in Ghana actually has a commonwealth in the country, that payer of the tax has the right, in principle, to have either the state cater to his religion, and for that matter, all other religions, or the state cater to no religion. Now, I'm saying this because it's important for us to recognize that by catering to the need for a cathedral, you're actually catering to a particular religious unit, and that religious unit represents a portion of the constituency of Ghana. So there's justification in that.
It represents the majority.
They represent the majority.
In excess of, we are told, 65, 70% plus.
Correct. But within the context of the Constitution, majoritarianism is not acceptable. Right. And not just is it not acceptable, but it undermines the principle of discrimination, which is on the other side, i.e. that there must be balance. The few must be catered for as much as the majority.
But what happens to 50% plus one, which gives us a president? It's majority.
That one gives you the president, and that's it. And the president is president for all. But again, it's important for us to remember, I do not think for a minute that the president is seeking to cater for the majority. I don't think the president is seeking that at all. So it's important for us to avoid going in that area, because if we're not careful, sooner than later we'll have complaints on the other side and there'll be confusions. I don't think the president is thinking of that at all. I think what the president is simply trying to do is basically to reflect best practice models globally, that countries have important spiritual points of congregation. And when we have important things coming up, we don't have to choose a particular church to go to. There must be the Ghanaian church. And the Ghanaian church is non-denominational, it is state-centric, it is befitting of the country, All these are lofty, important, beautiful ideas. I think just interrogating it, the point I'm just trying to make is, as we speak of the question of catering for one side unwittingly and not catering for the other side, it is important that we probably reflect on what the Sheikh said earlier. And I think I also agree with that. Even if we call it a national cathedral, we can call it a national cathedral and interfaith center or something. We can add something to it, just to give the sense of the fact that all others are incorporated. Now, I'm just saying, and I'm coming back to the question of the payment, who pays for it? I think the churches should pay for it. And if the churches are paying for this, the churches must pay, not only for the building the cathedral, but they must pay for the cost of relocating and taking for the ancillary things affecting the construction of the cathedral. Now, the reason I'll say this is there's a reason why churches have enjoyed tax exemptions all these years. They've enjoyed it, and recently we heard the president had a very important meeting with them.
Yeah.
I think that was a milestone. The president needs to be commended in this respect. The fact that he's actually taking that bull by the horn and met the churches, and I'm glad that the meeting went as well as we're informed. Having said that, for this, churches are tax exempt fundamentally for the reason of allowing them to undertake socially desirable projects. And over the years, churches have been doing these. The schools many of us attended were all built by churches. But I have to also state that lately the churches have not been doing that. Lately the churches have been indulging in commercial education, for example, and commercially related projects which are not socially desirable in the mainstream. I think moving forward on a project like this should be the culmination of the responsibility of churches. They build a project which is supposed to be more or less the headquarters of churches in Ghana. The cathedral is supposed to be the summation of all churches in Ghana, non-denominational, not sectoral but in character, and one which is national for specific national purposes. And again, that caters to the needs not only of Christians, but also of other faiths, so that the difficulty of religious discrimination by the use of our taxpayers' money, so to speak, doesn't come in question.
Okay, so there's an aspect that he mentions about, the constitutional question, and that is why a Ghanaian also is in court. James Kwabena Bomfeh has been in court for almost a year now, and just yesterday we also got to know in the evening that he has filed an application for interlocutory injunction to stop the government from allowing the portion of land to be tampered with any time before the suit itself is determined. Now, the little I think we can do to finish up as our final comments on this and move on to the next discussions is questioning. Now, the churches, as we know, they have come clear to say, we don't know how much it will cost yet. We are going to now undertake that process to know how much it will cost us to have this cathedral. But it is the churches that will do it. And that somebody, I think in the Church of Pentecost also, has already donated $2 million towards the project. Okay, so since they don't know the cost yet, and government is assisting to help them clear the place, how is government going to be able to give the estimates of how much it will cost and to come and tell the public about it? I'm just beginning to learn that the College of Physicians and Surgeons may be also affected. There's an aerial view of the place to be affected that is giving, that suggests that all of that will be affected, and questions are rising as to whether the College of Physicians and Surgeons have also been informed about these developments. So question is, we don't know the cost of the project yet. Are we not asking too much upfront?
No.
Dr. Santi,
okay,
yes.
Okay.
No, so first of all, I think there's a real issue of value for money if we go and demolish. So first of all, we are demolishing properties that we have spent taxpayers' money to construct. And then we are going to build new properties that we're going to use taxpayers' money. If that is even the government's contribution, I think just on the principle of value for money, that is not a good use of our money. So I just want to make that point. And also, I would have liked to see what other locations did this project consider. It's not possible that it just started as, okay, this is the only place we can build it, and it will move heaven and earth to get there. There are other places in Ghana, in Accra, if it's Accra, that's the option, for us to consider. So did they ever consider that? So just to put that aside, your question. Anybody who does construction would say, if you are going to embark on a project of this magnitude, it is critical that you are able to estimate your cost, where you're going to source the money from, because all of that would help you even to go back to the design and say, okay, maybe this may cost too much, and for this part of the design we need to modify it. Because if the state is going to make an investment in this, it is imperative that those kinds of standard practices, and these are best practices, are adhered to. And I worry, because we know from experience with these kinds of projects, it starts like this. There's no clarification on what the role of the state is, and then it escalates into all kinds of things. You cannot hold people responsible or track them for the expenditure. So it is actually, I am glad that we're having this conversation, because it's not late for us to do the proper thing, which is to make sure that we know what it's going to cost, and that would mean that we also explore different locations, because the cost of the land, where it's located and all of that, will impact on the overall cost.
The question of location is that it ought to be on prime area. And,
well, there are so
issues,
many prime areas.
And you may not find vacant land of, this is supposed to be how many, 14 acre area
Samson,
or
I
so.
think primary, I mean, there are different prime areas in Accra. I think we need to be realistic about that. It cannot be only in Ridge. I don't know what the Land Commission has. What I'm saying is that in looking for a location, is the government telling us that this is the only place we could do this, and there's no other place? I mean, as I said, I heard people talking about Bema Camp near the military cemetery and so on. I don't know the size of the land or whatever. But is this the only place that we can do this?
Okay.
So, but for me, it is important that we know the estimated cost, so that government can say, this is our contribution. This is where we are going to finance it from. We will see it in the budget. We can track it.
Okay.
This is, as Mr. Buchi is talking about, this is taxpayers' money. So the rules must apply. It's not because it's spiritual, we should also leave it to myth and superstition or whatever, that the figures just will magically appear at the end and we'll know what we have spent. I think it's imperative for everybody, even the churches who are making their contribution, to know the cost.
On your shots, you will see the buildings that are going to be demolished. And partly this is also to show you that the claims you may have heard elsewhere that the buildings are dilapidated is what I say, let's not build a cathedral on a foundation of lies. These buildings are 5 years old. In fact, you see some of them, they are incomplete. And we are told that reportedly, they haven't finished paying for them. We'll come to that question. You can see they are erecting them. They are not finished yet. Okay. So from Dr. Santi's point, we rush the government to come and give us an estimate, and then, as you guys have acknowledged, it may not take 2020 to have this cathedral ever ready. No. It's impossible. There is temporary accommodation rented, hoping that 21 new bungalows will be built by end of 2020. Supposing we bring you an estimate, and then the rent takes us about 5 years. We come and give you a different budget. The same Ghanaians will complain. So why don't we wait and have the full picture as in the end, and then let you know what the expenditure is?
Samson, we don't want to wait to have the full picture in the end, because then it means we'll be doing postmortem reviews. What I think we should do at this stage is go back to the drawing table. I think at this stage, it is not too late. We should rather call it a National Convention Center. Then, once we call it the National Convention Center, then the ownership will be vested in the states. Then after that, the state would invite the various faiths to contribute. Before the state does this invitation, the state would then have conducted what we call financial sensitivity analysis, feasibility analysis, strategic environmental analysis, and then an estimated cost backed with an estimated financing plan. And in the financing plan, the state will know how much it wants to commit and then how much the various faiths will also bring on board. When this happens, I think it will serve the cultural and the spiritual significance we want that particular center to play. You see, if it will be a center where we can swear people, presidents in, we organize important funerals. You realize that in important occasions, we invite the various faiths. We'll have a Christian prayer starting, and then the Muslim prayer will end. Other faiths would also come in. So why don't we conceptualize it to be a national convention center, like we have in other countries? So then it will be a partnership between the states and the various religious institutions.
And if I may just add something, a project of this magnitude will require a lot of environmental and social impact assessments.
Yes.
Okay.
If you have observed, everywhere we have had a bigger structure in this country, traffic has been a problem.
Okay.
The area that we have, it's very close to the ministerial enclave. Traffic build-up and subsequent events of other activities would have to be looked at extremely carefully. To what extent
these events are done once in a while?
Yes,
so
but
why should we be bothered about traffic?
Yeah, but that's why we actually need these. Because if you are going to have, for example, when Mandela died and the event was held, you saw the magnitude of global, important persons, assembling. And I know that Kofi-Annan's funeral is going to attract that magnitude of people. The whole place is going to be declared a security zone. The implications of that for neighboring areas, for traffic and all of that, it's important to look at. It's not possible.
When we are doing national functions at the National Theatre, International Conference Center, the State Banquet Hall, we don't complain about the traffic.
Well, we do. To be honest, you don't hear. People have complained consistently about the fact that roads have been blocked and there are no alternate access routes. So these are things that we need to take on board, so that when we have a national cathedral and it has to accommodate a national important event, these are not things we will begin to think about. If anybody will remember, when we had the Accra Mall built, the overflow of traffic into the Tetekwashi, enclave and area, it's something we are still dealing with. We haven't dealt with that. Why are these in this day and age? Why would we want to build a system like this before we think about all of this? So the point that I'm making is to buttress the point that this is a good project, and I don't mind where it's located. To be honest with you, once government can take all of the issues that they can deal with it, we need to. But it is important that we don't really do a reactive project. Okay. We don't have to come tomorrow and say, oh, we didn't think about this. Can we think about that? Let's put together a team of, I don't know, maybe that's been done. I may not be informed. But it's important to properly do this, especially the cost. How are we going to raise funds for a project and when we don't actually know the entire cost? I heard one of the Reverend Ministers saying that, oh, we haven't looked at the cost yet. And then your colleague, one of the news, questioning. So if you don't know the cost, how do we go? And then I heard somebody quote the Bible to say that the Bible says if you have to build a house, which of us will not, finish your preparations in-house before you go out to try and put it. These are, wisdom. This is wisdom we need to respect. So it is important for us to look at the cost. Let the Christian community come out with what the project is, the design. We just had an architectural drawing. We need to get the quantity surveyors, people, all of those people to go in there and tell us that in the end, this is how much it will cost us.
This is what they are now proceeding to do.
Yes, but you don't start demolishing before you get to that point. That's why I say that it's important. This is very important exercise we are doing. And I agree with the conversation around the table that as a country, we need to have this. But let's do it well. Doing it well will mean that let's see how much it will cost us and all of the clarity of issues of financing, especially from the state, but also from the religious groups that are going to be leading this, to say that in the end this will cost us $20 million, whatever $1 million, and that we have found the money. If you give that to a contractor and ask them to start, then you can predict when this will finish. But if there's no money and you are going to be starting, We cannot actually determine when we are going to get the money and all of that. Of course,
I
our
think
God will
I'll come to Abochi, and Manasseh Azura is not happy that I credit the one who has donated the $2 million to Pentecost. I was not sure. It's actually some member of his church, so Assemblies of God, Church Ghana. A man there is the one who has made the donation of $2 million for the project. Now, Mr. Abochi, the question that some have made a suggestion, and that suggestion appears not to look at the broader picture, that if you can find another place where you are going to put up 21 bungalows for the judges in cantonment, which is also prime area, why don't you take the property there? It suggests as if where they are going to do the new thing is bare land. I doubt it will be bare land in cantonment for the 21 buildings that will be put up between now and 2020. So the issue about relocation, why, and this is the aerial view of the place on the television, so you can see from the runabout to East Ridge and the Ridge Circle area. It's quite a vast place. Yes. So, Mr. Abochi, the question is, what there might be a certain sensitivity and attention because judges are being relocated. I mean, that's how many judges, and that's a question. Then is a Judicial Training Institute. Why can't we relocate it? Is a Scholarship Secretariat. Why can't we relocate it? Passport's Office, even if it affects the College of Physicians and Surgeons as well. What is the big deal?
I think the cost-benefit analysis of any project has to be taken into account, and I think that is the understanding of that is the understanding I have of the conversation we're having today. One needs to have a proper assessment of what the costs of doing the project is vis-a-vis the benefits. The benefits, as we have indicated, there's very little doubt that it has some benefits and it has some useful benefits. In terms of cost, we can't discuss cost until we have a sense of what actually the input is going to be. And I think that from my understanding of the conversation, it looks as if we don't have the details. And the details of exactly what the construction cost is going to be and what the cost of demolishing the existing structures is going to be, is or are going to be. And don't you forget that it's not just the cost of the properties that are there, but there's a cost of the services leading to the destruction itself. All that is cost. And then invariably, what the costs of putting up the new judges in new facilities and structures is also going to be. I was just going to say, in relation to this, that maybe we should cast our minds back a little to former President Akufo-Addo in Cote d'Ivoire, when he put up the Basilica in Yamoussoukro. I remember in the 90s, early 90s, there was a lot of brouhaha, even in Ghana, which is not our country. I mean, Cote d'Ivoire is not our country, but there was a lot of talk about that, how he spent so much of Ivory Coast money to put up a basilica then. But significantly for me and for this particular conversation, what I'll say is he moved away from Abidjan, albeit for, I think, opportunistic reasons. I mean, he may have other reasons for that, because I think that was his hometown. But suddenly, he put Yamoussoukro on the map. I mean, nobody probably knew much about Yamoussoukro, but suddenly we all knew there was a place in Cote d'Ivoire called Yamoussoukro. We have a lot of fixation in Ghana for wanting to be in the center. And all of us here, I'm sure, given the chance to choose where we buy our houses, I'm sure we all want to be in the cantonment enclave or the airport area. I mean, the traditional places. We have a fixation of wanting to be in the thick of the action. Yet, we have spaces outside the middle, but around Accra, which may provide, I think, a strategic and congenial environment for a facility like this. So as we try to feed into the richness of the entire conversation as the process is underway, if it's doable, I think this is one possible consideration that may be made. That the Ivorian example, the Ivorian model, provides a good example of how a high-flying facility like a basilica, and in this case a cathedral, can suddenly actually create an economic, social, and environmental enclave in a place which otherwise probably was not known or anybody talked about. And so that's something we can think about. So that as we speak of the traffic congestion, as we speak of the destruction of existing properties, which actually are housing judges, as we speak of all these things, and as we feed into the conversation, one may want to reflect on the other strategic advantage, not just dealing with this, but a strategic advantage of probably creating a new township, a new area of focus and premium around the country, not just mainstream Accra, but collateral Accra, that is on the fringes of Accra, and a place that may actually end up just doing the work.
Right. Okay. On that note, at the meeting with the clergy, we understood that the church leaders, as the Board of Trustees, will hold a meeting on Tuesday, coming Tuesday, and we may get to know their decision. We have heard, is it Reverend Frimpong Manso, who was part of the initial processes, suggests that they may want to take a second look at the location. Actually, he confesses that they didn't know about the location from the start. But we have heard also people within government who insist that there should be nothing done to the location. It should be the place that ought to be used for this particular project. Okay, so there are questions and issues coming up. I'll read your messages when we return from this break. Dennis Senior Enti says, so the cathedral is ex gratia for the services that Christianity rendered to Ghana. That's an interesting way you can expect Ghanaians to put things. Then this one says, Oklu Joseph, for me, the argument that the state is not incurring any cost is the most ridiculous I have heard so far. Okay, who set up the National Cathedral Board? And he's asking a number of questions. This is where the confusion is, and we are seeing traits of lies. How can you build God's house on lies and deception? Sisi Kole says that the relocation of judges to build the cathedral is a misplaced priority and not to be upheld. Ghanaians need hospitals, schools, and you're being told the churches are already doing these things. So what's your issue? All right. Then Farid Mohammed said, I'm surprised no one is talking about the passport office, but rather the judges' relocation. We have mentioned it here, please. We are not even asking more about how the passport services delivery will be impacted. Okay, that's also another discussion. Nana Kweku Fosu says that, good morning. To your panelists, if the churches are going to fund the cathedral and all other ancillary facilities and costs like the relocation of the judges, etc., why then do we call the place Interfaith Center? Okay, so you may have sent that before you got information clearly about the fact that it's not the churches that are funding the relocation and other matters. Kweku Hova says, Samson, lands have been given, demolition is gonna happen. The design has been unveiled grandly, and yet we do not know the cost and where the funds are going to come from. This is kind of strange. We know where the funds are going to come from. They're going to come from fundraising activities by the board and the committee. Dominic Okon-Ochre says, when a reverend minister lies through his teeth about government not contributing in building the cathedral, is the land not for Ghana? Is the cathedral our priority? Okay, so let's be careful the language we use. I can't read the rest of it. Let me just share a few more here. Martin Luther in Laboni says the intent by religious leaders and support given by the president to build a national cathedral should be subjected for mere political discourse. Or you meant it should not. The intelligent questions that those media houses should ask before drawing conclusions are, one, will the state finance the project, or what negative effects will it have on the country? Okay, Kofi Ajiman Boateng also says, in a country where there are more churches than schools, what makes the building of a cathedral a priority? The same architect who designed Rwanda's National Treatment Center for Cancer some few years ago is the one called upon to design our national cathedral, Kwabena Ade. If it's a national cathedral for Christians, then let the politicians stay away from it so the Christians can champion the entire project. That way, no one can raise the issue of cost and all the others, and what they put in it, okay, is no one's business. All right. Right, okay, so I'll end the text messages there, and Manasseh just corrects me that he's actually, he's a Presbyterian, so I should be careful not to get his bishop to call him to ask when he defected into the Assemblies of God Church. But Dr. Akufo-Addo says the discussion on Ghana's cathedral has been excellent, but I wish to add that a cathedral should not necessarily be located at the prime area in Accra. Cathedrals are not symbolic monuments of grandiose. They rather celebrate architectural brilliance, culture, and exercise of faith in humility. Why then should we destroy properties to build a cathedral? All right. Thanks for those views that you share.